WITN or Marshall, can someone let me know when we have quorum?
Yes, Councilman Johnson, we'll let you know when there's a quorum.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello, and good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Mr. Chair, it looks like President Congo has entered, and that will make it a quorum. So you may begin when you're ready.
Okay, just bear with me because I know we had a revised agenda.
WITN, if you can make George Fernandez a panelist as well.
Marshall, can you make sure I have the most recent agenda, please?
Okay, sorry, WITN, I had cut out for a minute. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Great. And I just want to make sure clean up the revised agenda. All right, WITN, let me know if you're ready.
Mr. Chair, you may begin when you're ready.
All right. Good evening, everyone. I'm Chris Johnson. I'm the chairman of the Economic and Finance Committee of City Council, and I'm from the 7th District. This time, I will like to do a roll call for fellow members. Vice Chair Harley, 4th District.
Present.
Council Member Oliver, 3rd District. Okay, Council Member Field, 8th District.
Present.
At-large Councilmember Walsh is excused. At-large Councilmember Spadola.
Present.
And Council President Congo.
Here.
All right. All right. And again, I'd like to say welcome to everyone who's tuning in the public as we are conducting tonight's meeting via video conference. The hope is, of course, with the pandemic somewhat easing up, we'll be back in the hybrid form for next month. But the rules are the same as they are for when we're in person in chambers. We do have quite a robust agenda, but we always look to engage the public. So if you're not signed up for public comment, please do so as soon as you can. We have a if you can do it through Zoom, or you can do a raised hand feature as well. We can recognize both, similar as to when we're in person. Rules are the same as before. It's 3 minutes, of course, for public comment. And with that, I would like to begin our items. We do have a revised agenda, just to let everyone know. As there were some moving around of items. And let me just double check. Oh, we do have Councilmember Gray here from the 1st District,
Thank you.
and Councilmember at Large Mills. Do I have you as well?
Yes, present.
And Councilmember Darby from the 2nd District.
Present.
All right. Thank you very much, everyone. And please let me know if someone comes in or has a question. All right. Well, we'd like to kick it off our robust agenda with a presentation of the State American Rescue Plan. We are fortunate to be joined here this evening by our dear State Treasurer, Colleen Davis. As for many of you who don't know her from the city, she is a great person to know, and it makes it an effort of her administration to keep the city engaged and abreast on how the city treasurer's office and state government can help bring resources to our city. So thank you very much, Treasurer Davis, for joining us, and the floor is yours, ma'am, and we're certainly glad to have you. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. I appreciate being with you all this evening. A lot of the responsibility of transacting the American Rescue Plan Act funds were under the authority of my office. And so what I'll do is just kind of quickly run through the allowable uses. I'll kind of start there. Let me know if there are any issues with my connection. I know I'm kind of, sometimes it's good, sometimes it isn't. So, so I'll just start by saying that there are specifics as to how these funds could be allocated. The first and probably most common that many of our towns are utilizing these funds for are for revenue replacement. Many of our cities and towns felt the true impact of COVID by direct hit to their revenue, and so those revenue losses were first and foremost allowable spend under due to the COVID-19 challenges. The other areas in which allowable use and allowable spend are for infrastructure for clean water, as well as sewer, broadband, and capital investment, particularly in neighborhoods with the greatest needs. The other thing that many of our towns are looking to spend the funds on is really for a variety of different supports to nonprofits. Many of our nonprofits have been hit pretty substantially, and they support our towns and our communities in a very impactful way. So I will say that we were responsible for the first tranche of allocations. So just as a recap, the American Rescue Plan Act essentially put into the hands of our local units of government about $1.9 trillion across the US. It was a stimulus package that was aimed at helping to support the economies across the nation, and sort of that robust attempt to return to the pre-COVID strength that we saw in our economy. One of the things that also meant was that those funds were to come to us in 2 tranches. So we received half of those funds last year, and the other half will be allocated again late May, early June, depending on the timeline. And so for the city of Wilmington, it was a slightly different process, but the city of Wilmington directly connected with US Treasury to receive payment. The total first disbursement was $55 million. I'm sorry, the total allocation was $55,345,780. that first payment was $27,672,890 received on June 9th. And again, you'll receive that second payment directly from US Treasury expected in early June 2022 this year. As an example, Dover received $8,619,250. Newcastle County received $108,531,220. Kent received $35,115,561, and Sussex County received $45,495,460. So again, of the $65.1 billion total allocation to cities big and small, 45.57 billion, or roughly 70% of those funds, were allocated to major metropolitan cities using the modified community development block grant formula calculation. And then the remaining 19.53 billion, or about 30% of the funds, was allocated using a simple per capita calculation with a total grant size for the non-metropolitan cities capped at 75% of the locality's most recent budget. What did that mean? It meant that my office was responsible for reaching out to the 55 non-entitlement units of government here in the state, so that the 55 small towns, and asking for their budget as best they could muster, in the midst of COVID, and sort of reviewing that budget, submitting the information to US Treasury. We then were able to receive, the first tranche was $42.8 million. We received those funds and then dispersed them to the towns. And then again, we're expected to late May, early June, depending on when those submissions were first initiated, we'll have that second portion, $42.8 million, dispersed out to our towns. Overall, it's a lot of money that's coming in. You all are sort of responsible for ensuring that the spend is done and done correctly. And really, my expectation is that you've got a lot of conversations going with local community advocates, as well as a variety of individuals that are concerned that the spending gets done in a way that's most meaningful to the community. So I kind of put a lot of information out there. I can try to answer some questions as best as I possibly can, and I see that.
Yes, Treasurer Davis, we have a question from Councilmember Gray.
Thank you. Yeah, I have several questions. My first is, the money can be given or allocated to nonprofits, and you were saying that's a need across the state. Who is responsible to make sure those nonprofits use the ARPA money under the guidelines that it's supposed to be used?
That's a really important question, and some of that is because there's actually a financial cap. And so if you have a nonprofit that's coming to you asking for $49,000, then you're able to make that allocation directly to them. Once that you hit that threshold and you're sort of, let's say they're asking for $55,000, that's when they then have to submit their proposal through US Treasury's online portal, much like we've had to do at the state level to sort of submit every single plan. And the same is true for each town across the state, that those allocations or those proposals for spending have to be done on the US Treasury's portal.
Thank you. So they wait, so the money cannot be given to them once they go over that threshold until the US Treasury comes back and say that whatever they submitted was okay?
That's my understanding. Yep.
Okay, thank you. So that means that if we give them the money, we're not responsible for making sure they use it correctly. They've already submitted something that says they will. Okay. And my other question was, you were saying that you requested the budgets from some towns to see, I guess that was for the revenue replacement aspect, correct?
Well, yeah, so in the process of applying through US Treasury, we had to indicate whether or not, let's say, for example, one of our towns' local budget was $100,000. We could not allocate over 75% of that annual budget. So we had to say, okay, even though your budget was $100,000, we're only able to give you 75,000 at 75% of your annual budget, if that makes sense.
Yes, but you nor the Treasury look in to see if there is necessary revenue replacement prior to the cities requesting the money. You just take their
No,
word.
it's solely based on their annual budget.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you
Thank
very
you.
much, Treasurer Davis. There's no other questions from council at this time. I'm going to turn to members of the public. If there's any questions or comments by members of the public. Okay. Seeing none, I will then turn it.
Chris, I just want to make a statement, Mr. Chair.
Oh, yes, and Councilmember Oliver, I would first recognize you. I have you down tonight. Thank you for attending, and the floor is yours, Councilwoman.
No, I just wanted to be acknowledged and thank Ms. Davis for coming on. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, there's no other questions, Treasurer Davis. I appreciate this overview. As you know, we all are excited the funds are here, but I think there's obviously a lot of questions. Oh, we have Councilmember Gray. You have another question?
I just thought of something else. What do you mean that it can be used for water? That the ARPA money can be used for water? I mean, is that, I don't understand. I mean, to bring water to the city to supplement people who are having problems paying for water, or what? Clean the water?
Yeah, so it's meant for infrastructure for clean water or sewer. And so a lot of our towns are utilizing the funds to replace old lead piping, things like that. And the one thing that I will say is that one of the tasks that we sort of included in distributing the funds was also sort of ensuring that all of our towns had a sense of what would be allowable, because in the American Rescue Plan Act, there is some language that states that the funds can be clawed back if they're misspent. And so we didn't want to see any of our towns in that predicament. And we also knew that some of our towns being so small, they don't have counsel in-house. And so a lot of those questions we sort of deferred to council, and we were able to sort of pool resources and recommend that that towns get together and get the same legal counsel. And that way, town over here and town over there is both looking to spend funds in a way that is allowable. So for the most part, it's lead pipes, but I think for some, there's also some question as to whether they can support wastewater, water runoff, some of the environmental supports that are necessary to ensure that that the water that is being piped in is remains clean and sort of unmingled with other sources of water, if that makes sense.
Oh, yes, very informative. Thank you. I'm done, Chair. Sorry.
No problem. Thank you. Like I said, I want to thank Treasurer Davis. As many towns, big and small, seem to have a lot of questions. It almost seems like more questions than answered, but I appreciate the great work of you and your staff for being here for everyone in state as we try to figure out how we can use these funds in our neighborhood. So thank you very much, Treasurer Davis, and as always, please don't make yourself a stranger to the city, as I know you don't. You're up in Wilmington often from Sussex.
I'm here in Carvel right now.
Yes, so we certainly appreciate
out the window there behind me.
So we certainly appreciate you coming, and we look forward to hearing more from your office.
Thanks so much. You guys take care. Thanks for having me.
Okay, thank you. All right. Keeping moving through our busy agenda, I'm actually going to go out of order a little bit. So actually, item number item number 7 on the agenda, the update on the city's American Rescue Plan. We're actually going to move that up. So is anyone from the administration here to speak about where the administration is with ARPA?
Yes. Sorry, I didn't raise my hand. Good evening, Chairman Johnson, all city council members. I'm here to give an update on the ARPA spend down. And I can say that there hasn't been much change from the last time that I reported. We have one administrative extra allocation, which is EDIS. And as you know, the mayor is started the neighborhood revitalization efforts, and EDIS will help manage that process and actually managing all the projects that take place. And that goes along with permitting and just making sure that those contractors are staying on target and meeting all the deadlines. So we have EDIS that's going to be managing that. In addition to that, we had 2 DBEs that we gave allocations to. That's the Juice Joint and Nomads. And they both received, the Juice Joint received $20,000 and Nomad received $41,000. So that was the additional spend down under the community investment. And in terms of neighborhood revitalization, these are just really contracts to organizations to do the construction work. And so we had allocation to Eastside Housing Partners, Delaware Affordable Housing Group, and Cornerstone West CDC. And all of those agencies will be doing facade improvements, renovations to housing, rehabilitation to housing to make them affordable housing at some point, so they will be sold. And, you know, and this is all taking place in the East Side. So all of that, those are the only changes to what I reported from last month. So I will entertain any questions. Oh, I'm sorry. I need to mention that we have started working on the essential pay for the workers who worked during the pandemic that were our first line workers. And we are working with the Human Resources Department to structure those payments. As you know, I mentioned earlier, those are negotiated payments that, you know, the unions have to accept. So we are working on, you know, structuring those payments, and we will be in touch with the unions. Hopefully we can get the agreements in place before the end of this month.
Okay, and to Chief Staff Washington, thank you very much for that, the last tidbit, because that's one of the questions I was going to have. So the hazard pay is there, and again, I don't want to hold
essential pay,
to it.
premium pay, yeah.
Yeah, yes, premium pay. Is there anticipated that hopefully the workers will get their checks by April? Is that?
Well, they first have to accept it, because it you know, being a union, you do have to accept the payment. So once we present them with the offer, they have to actually sign off on it.
Okay. All right, and then at that point,
then after that, yeah, they'll get your checks.
Now, what about non-union employees?
So far, this is really just focused around the union. So 320, 1102, and police and fire.
Okay. All right. And will there be more discussion about non-union compensation as well?
I can't recall where there was an instance where we had a non-union worker that came in every day or interacted with the public on a daily basis. The ones that came in every day, I know that we came into the office every day, regardless of the pandemic. But you know, we're focusing on those individuals like police and fire that have to be out in the public. They can't work from home. It's not a remote work situation. So the non-union workers tend to have the ability to work from home. And a lot of them did during that pandemic. So, we have our L&I code enforcement officers, and we have our sanitation chuckers who, were out there in the field every day.
And well, last question, Chief of Staff Washington, for now, do we have an estimate of the total number of workers who may be covered under this scheme?
The total at this
That's
point
the
that I
payment
know
plan.
is about 825.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much, Chief of Staff Washington. Now I'm going to turn it to questions from members of council. Councilmember Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My first question is, was EDIS a bidding process that they got the money to manage?
Actually, we did send out an RFP for that, and they were the only ones that responded.
Okay, thank you. And for the nonprofits that are going to work on the projects, have they submitted? My understanding, I thought, was they have to submit their program to the Treasury and be approved.
So those are not grants to the organization because they were hit hard by the pandemic. These are actual contract agreements where they're actually doing work in the community. So they're actual contracts.
Okay, they're contracts. So they're not getting ARPA money.
Yeah, I mean, it's under ARPA, but it's for neighborhood revitalization. So it's not under community investment where you see the nonprofits.
Oh, okay. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Councilmember Oliver, I believe you're
Yes.
next.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Chair, thank you. Like there's the Chief of Staff, when are we going to get the copy of the contracts for the individuals who I saw over West End today? The mayor stated that he signed a contract with them vendors that were in West Center City. And I think Chris and I think Daniel was asking before he left, when are we going to be able to see the contracts that from the ARPA money that was given to the contractors?
I wasn't aware that there was a request for the contracts, and I'm not sure exactly what organization that you're referring to, but if you tell me, then I have no problem getting that contract and forward it to you.
May I follow up, Mr. Chair?
Yes, please.
Yes, it was 11 vendors in there. I would think maybe you would have a list of the vendors that were in West Center City. I was over there at 4 o'clock and the mayor announced that he signed contracts with all of them under this ARPA's money. So whenever you get a chance, if you could send that over, it'd be well appreciated to see how much the contractors received. That's all.
Okay, not a problem.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Barrett, thank you. And I'm going to now turn it to members of the public if there's any questions or comments. All right. Seeing none. Now I'm going to turn it back to members of council. If any final questions or comments. All right. Well, thank you very much, Chief of Staff Washington. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Giving some more information, and we, as we have been doing every month, we definitely look forward to obviously having you back for the budget hearings, but having you back at next month's Finance Committee meeting as well. Thank you very much.
I believe Councilmember Gray has her hand.
Oh, sorry, I missed that. Councilmember Gray.
Later, thank you. I don't recall from the last meeting, but is the POW Center included in one of the nonprofits that's going to get money out of the ARPA funds?
No, not that I'm aware of. I've not received any requests to move funding to the POW.
Well, that was one of my requests, but you haven't received anything from the POW Center, you're saying?
I don't have anything from the POW. I
Okay.
don't.
Thank you.
And yeah.
I'll look into it because I thought he said he had sent a program up a long, long time ago, but I'll ask what happened.
Yeah, and just so we're clear, Councilmember Gray, so when council has an interest in receiving ARPA funds, there's usually a conversation with the council leadership, or council president, and then it's forwarded over to us whatever that number looks like, and we have the discussion. So that's probably why you haven't seen it, because it hasn't been brought up like as an organization that was actually identified to receive ARPA.
Okay, thank you. It must have been lost because it's one of the first, it's about the only large nonprofit I have in the first district. So it was brought up at the very beginning. So I'll look into what happened. It was just on a list along with Faithful Friends, who money was
Yeah.
given to. But it was on that I only had 3 requests: Faithful Friends, Pal Center, and I don't even remember the other one now. But okay, thank you.
Mhm.
All right, thank you very much. And we have Vice Chair. Actually, I'm gonna call Ms. Bass Knight first from City Council. Is there a comment? Ms. Bass Knight? You're
I'm
on
good.
mute.
I'm good. You can disregard.
Oh, you're good
me.
now? Okay.
Thank
All right,
you.
gotcha. All right, Vice Chair Harley. Floor
Thank
is
you,
yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mrs. Washington, my question is, is the administration planning on honoring the proposal from Christina Cultural Arts Center? As you know, they did submit a proposal several months ago. And when I look at some of the other organizations that are aligned with Christina Cultural Arts Center, we know they've been around for 76 years. Very good programs and services they're providing. So I'm not 100% sure how y'all determined which organizations that you were giving money to, like the Children's Museum, I know is one, Latin Community Center is one. Again, was there a decision made for Christina Cultural Arts Center?
No, so as I said earlier, I look to see for a recommendation from City Council staff, like, okay, these are the projects that City Council's interested in funding with some number attached to that, have a discussion with the mayor, but I need the other organizations that receive funding was actually a communication from the previous chief of staff and said, these are organizations that council's okay with funding. So once I get that, because we're just not going to make that decision without having some council input, and then, I would move forward.
Follow up, Mr. Chair.
Yes, please.
Okay, so to my understanding, Christina Cultural Arts Center was on the list for City Council. So I'm not sure what you mean as it relates to a conversation between City Council and administration. So are you saying that they were not on the list from City Council?
No, what I'm saying is that there are so many requests, right? That council receives, the mayor's office receives. And so council staff will say, okay, we received, just for the sake of argument, 50 requests. Out of these 50, here are the organizations that council wants to move forward with. So while they very well may have sent you a letter of request, I have not received anything with a number attached to it saying that council wants to move forward, saying that, if it's $100,000, council would like for them to receive $100,000. I have not received that from council staff. That's what I'm saying. And we're not just going to make that decision without having some sort of conversation.
That's understood, and that's to be respected. I guess what I'm surprised at is that the administration did not receive it and there wasn't a conversation about it. But I will follow up with that on our side. So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair Harley. And as a point of clarification, that this was a process we were previously going under, the process where we try to as a group. So I think we need to have some more internal discussions on council about the next batch of projects that we will be, promoting to the administration, rather than, piecemeal project here, piecemeal project there. We can have a comprehensive idea of what our next ask is. I believe that's a process we expect to follow. And Ms. Bass Knight,
Yes,
more.
I'm sorry.
Is there?
Yes. Yes, if I can.
Mhm. Yes, please.
Um,
Your reception's fading in and out. We can't hear.
Chairman, just to add on to what you're saying is,
Yeah.
can you hear? Because I'm here in the building.
Yes.
Can you hear me? Okay, so yes. So yes, we need to have the next steps to be done for the next batch of requests to go over to the administration. In addition, I just want to remind council persons that they also have the $30,000, that they also have the $300,000 in ARPA funds that's also divided amongst the 13 council persons as well.
Yes, and thank you very much, Ms. Basnight. That was a great point. I even forgot to mention there needs to, again, I think more internal discussions on the council side as to a joint unified effort that can be used. So, all right. Well, is there any other questions from or comments from members of council? All right. Again, thank you very much, Chief of Staff Washington. I appreciate you being engaged with us, and definitely look forward to seeing you at next month's finance meeting. Of course, the budget hearings, which are coming up.
Yes, thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Thank you. All right. Moving down the agenda, and I hate to do this, but because I know a few council members may have to hop off the line due to some pre-scheduled, due to some schedule conflicts that came up this afternoon. We're actually going to do the ordinances first. So we're going to start with agenda number item 5, which is the introduction of ordinance 22-007, which is an ordinance authorizing the issuance of the city's general obligation bonds and bond anticipation notes in order to provide the funds necessary to finance various capital projects. I am the sponsor on this matter, and this is a matter in which the city will be going to the bond market for approximately $15 million in bonds. And is there anyone from the administration that is here to speak on this matter?
Chairman Johnson, this is Brett Taylor.
Okay.
I'm the finance director, and I'll be speaking to this legislation.
All right, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. This legislation authorizes the city to issue $15 million in general obligation bonds. Now, these bonds will not be solicited from the bond market per se, much like we do with our biennial bond issuance, but rather we're looking for a solicitation from area banks to provide us with bond anticipation notes. These are temporary notes totaling $15 million that will be used for capital. This capital will go into capital projects, specifically for the 2020 and 2022 capital projects. The types of projects that we anticipate spending these funds on are for parks projects and for public works projects, both in the water sewer fund, as well as for street improvements. Now, the reason we're going out for these funds is twofold. Number one, under the current code, you have to designate very specifically those projects by which you go out and access capital. At the last biennial bond issuance, there were a number of capital projects in the 2020 and 2022 capital improvement program that were not allocated to any of those bonds. Number two, we anticipate going out to the bond market for our biennial large bond issuance. However, given the fact that we'll be working through the spring, summer, and fall these are our prime dates for parks improvements, street improvements, and water sewer improvements, we need to have the capital necessary in order for us to work through those projects. Now, bond anticipation notes are temporary notes that eventually get taken out and refinanced through our fall biennial bond issuance, meaning that we will go out and permanently replace the bond anticipation notes with anywhere from 1 year to 20-year bonds, depending on the life cycle of the project. All this this ordinance does is authorize us and allows us to go out, raise this capital on a short-term basis, which will then be folded into our major capital bond issuance in the fall.
Okay, thank you very much, Director Taylor. Councilmember Gray.
Thank you. I think I just stepped away how we were getting this money when you go out to get the bond money. Who are you getting it from? The taxpayer, private businesses?
Well, there's really two steps. Let's talk about the bond anticipation notes, and then we'll talk about the bond issuance in the fall. Basically, we are going to area banks, and we're going to be soliciting proposals from area banks to provide capital coming into the city for these projects. That capital will have a principal and interest associated with it, those bonds, those notes rather. These notes will have a principal and interest payment associated with them. However, we will take those notes out most likely within the next 6 to 8 months with a bond issuance. So for the bond anticipation notes, we're not raising that money from the public. We are soliciting this from area banks, and we will be using our debt service budget to pay the principal and interest on those bonds back. Now, for bond issuance, which occurs usually a large bond issuance is done through the capital markets, we go and place those bonds into the public markets through Wall Street. We get a rating agency credit evaluation, and financial institutions like to buy our bonds in order to place them in their own portfolios. Those bonds have a principal and interest associated with them that we would pay annually, and that comes out of our normal budget. So it comes out of the taxpayers as they pay their taxes in. We incorporate debt service as part of our normal budget. That's how those bonds get paid back.
Thank you. But even when people buy our bonds, we have to pay principal and interest? You said banks like to buy our bonds once we get to the bond market and include them in their portfolio.
That's correct. Yeah, usually with bond anticipation notes, as much as bond with general obligation bonds, we're basically pledging the full faith and credit to repay those bonds back. Now, if you were to go out to say, Charles Schwab, purchase one of those bonds, put it in your portfolio, essentially the city of Wilmington is promising to pay not only the principal annually based on an amortization, but also the interest. So we're guaranteeing the interest to the bondholder.
Okay, thank you. A lot to absorb. May I continue, Mr. Chair?
Yes, please.
Well, beyond that, you said the bonds that you're going after ultimately are going to be used for sewer, and I forgot what else. Do you have the projects already outlined so that we can see which projects this money in the future will be used for? Because there's a lot of sewer problems throughout the city. So I'd like to know which projects you're getting bond money for.
Yes, we have a list of, we have a list for the bond anticipation notes.
Mm-hmm.
For the bond issuance, the general obligation bond issuance in the fall, that's based on our capital improvements program. We'll be selecting the projects to fold into that bond issuance at a later date. But the CIP has been fully approved, we would use 2020 CIP and the 2022 CIP, which City Council has already authorized as part of the capital improvements budgets that it did in FY20 and FY22. But we'd be happy to refresh that information for you.
Okay, thank you. If you could, that's all, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you very much. And since this is at first, is there any other questions from members of council? All right, I'm going to kick it to members of the public if there's any questions or comments. All right, seeing none. Again, last call for members of council. Any questions or comments? Okay, seeing none, since this is an ordinance, it does need to be officially voted out of committee. So with that, I would entertain a motion to approve ordinance 22-007 to the full council for a vote.
Mr. Chair, it should be substitute number 1. I'm sorry. Should be substitute number 1.
Sorry, substitute number 1 to ordinance 22-007. I would entertain a motion.
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. It's been moved and seconded to move substitute 1 to ordinance 22-007. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right. The matter the ordinance has passed and it will move to full council for a vote. I believe it will be March 17th. Is that the next date, Marshall? Last night?
April the 7th.
Oh, April 7th. Okay, sorry about that. All right, thank you very much. And moving to the next item, again, going out of order to handle the ordinance matters first. We have an ordinance to authorize and approve a service agreement between the City of Wilmington and Verizon for the N11 dialing system. Pull it up. This is a okay. This is ordinance 22-012. Do we have anyone from the administration here to speak on that item?
Yes, good evening, Councilman Johnson, and good evening, other members of council.
Okay, the floor is yours, Ms. Mergler.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me here today to discuss this service agreement with Verizon to provide N11 dialing service. This agreement will allow Verizon landline customers within Wilmington city limits to dial the abbreviated phone number 311 to connect to the City of Wilmington call center. Currently, Verizon landline customers must dial the full phone number, which is 302-576-2620, in order to connect to the Wilmington 311 call center. Verizon is the last major telecommunications carrier to allow this service in the city. Comcast was brought on board in 2021. The agreement is month to month with no affirmative end date, but the city can terminate with 30 days notice. The annual cost will vary based on customer usage, but it is expected to cost us no more than $3,000 annually. I am happy to discuss the details of the cost, or if you have any other questions, I'm happy to answer those as well.
All right. I don't have any questions, Ms. Mergler, but I will turn it to my colleagues if there's any questions or comments by members of council. All right. Seeing none, I'm going to turn it to members of the public for any questions or comments for Ms. Mergler. Okay. All right. Seeing none, I'm going to turn it back to members of council for any final questions or comments. Seeing none, since this is in an ordinance similar to the last item, it does need to be officially voted out of committee to be placed before full council for a vote. So with that, I'll entertain a motion to move ordinance 22-012 out of committee to full council for a vote.
So moved.
Second.
Is there a second? All right, it's been moved and seconded to move ordinance 22-012 to full council for a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right. Any opposed? Okay, the ayes have it. And ordinance 22-012 will be placed on full council for a vote. I believe that will be April 7th. Thank you very much, Ms. Mergler. All
Thank
right.
you, Chairman Johnson.
All right. Moving right along, we now have, going back in order, we have item number 2 on the agenda. It's an overview of the fiscal year 2021 CAFR, which is the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report for the period ending June 30th, 2021. Who will be speaking on this item?
Chairman Johnson, I will be, this is Brett Taylor again. I will be speaking on this item.
Okay. All right. Director Taylor, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you very much for the opportunity to report out the results of our FY 2021 financial statements. We have produced the financial statements. We've given a copy to Marshall, and hopefully, I believe she has distributed it to council members. We've also placed the report on the City of Wilmington website. This is a public document. I find that if you read through the document, even though it is quite long, there's lots of really helpful information about how the finances work in the City of Wilmington. I know it can be intimidating, but I still encourage everyone to go ahead and take a look at the report. It includes notes. Many of those notes are relative to things that you deal with every day in your city council activities. And also, I'd like to offer, if anyone wants me to sit and go through the report with them in a little more detail or answer very specific questions, I'd be happy to do so. Given the fact that the annual report is so big, I'm going to focus tonight on 2 areas, and that is the general fund and the water sewer fund. As you know, we have an overall government funds accounting for funds that includes special funds, many component units, and the like. In the water sewer area, those are part of the enterprise funds. There's a number of enterprise funds, but for the most part, 90% of the annual financial report is taken up through the general fund and through the water sewer fund. There's also a substantial portion of it that is dedicated to the pension funds. I'm not going to go into details about those. 2 last comments. One is we report out these numbers also to the Wilmington Economic and Financial Advisory Committee, WEFAC. WEFAC recently had a meeting in which we went through the financial projections for 2022. We also looked at the results for 2021 with regard to the number of to projections as to where revenues and expenditures are going. I would refer to the WEFAC documents for that information. The last note is the Government Financial Officers Association has issued guidance nationally and internationally that we are no longer going to be referring to the annual financial report as the CAFR, C-A-F-R as its acronym. The reason for that is that in some countries, the CAFR, the acronym, is a derogatory term that is may be offensive to some. Given the fact that it's an international organization, they have recommended that we begin to refer to it as the Annual Comprehensive Financial Report. We'll just refer to it tonight as the Annual Financial Report. Next slide.
I have to stop you, Director Taylor. That's the first time I've heard that. Is that new lingo, or I did not know that it was offensive?
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
apologize for.
No. It's not. The very few people know that. And I'm just trying to, again, GFOA issued that guidance, and I would just want to make sure that everybody is aware of it. So,
Thank you very much.
okay.
Let's do
So
that.
there's no reason anybody would have known that unless that's why I'm giving that announcement today. So thank you. So what I want to do is work from our income statement to our balance sheet. And basically, the income statement represents just a statement of where we are with our revenues against expenditures. There are some intricacies with regard to other funding sources and where we end up with our fund balance. Now, as you recall, our fund balance is an important part of our financial calculus. It does two things. One is it provides reserves for us, both in the budget reserve account as well as the tax stabilization reserve, to set aside funds in case there is issues pertaining to revenue drops. COVID would be one of those situations where we may experience a revenue drop. The FY21 financial statement covers July 1st, 2020 through June 30th, 2021. As you may recall, this is really the height of where we were with respect to COVID. And a number of the figures, a number of the revenues we were looking at were impacted by COVID. The good news is that we were able to substantially pivot and make sure that we kept our expenditures under containment. Revenues that were impacted, and again, cite you back to the WEFAC information, the ones that were impacted were really in the areas of wage taxes and parking revenues. We didn't see too much of a bump in two areas where we did expect it, and that was in areas of state revenues coming in for things like corporate filings and whatnot. It seemed to, net profits seemed to hold stable. Also, a number of our incorporation funds from the revenue sharing from the state stable. And we had a really good boost with respect to our real estate transfer tax. We did see a slight downturn in FY21 from 20, but not significant. It was not a significant drop. In fact, our expectation for 22 is that real estate transfer tax is going to remain relatively stable, if not too high. So the general fund income statement is that we had revenues of $175,171,554. Our expenditures were lower. Our expenditures were $159,254,974, leaving us with a surplus, an operating surplus of $15,916,580. We did have some other financing sources. These were primarily due to costs associated with the bond issuance that we had in, I guess it was November of 2020. The net of those financing sources and uses, was $1,344,130, giving us a change in the fund balance from FY20 to FY21 of $14,572,450. Now, I do want to remark that the revenues of $175 million included $8.8 million in CARES Act reimbursements. So effectively, we had CARES Act reimbursements that we were eligible for under the CARES Act. We floated those expenditures, and the Treasury repaid us on that basis. When they repaid us, we had to book that as normal revenue coming in. So of that 175 million, 8.8 of it includes the CARES Act expenditure reimbursements. That certainly helped a great deal with our change in fund balance, or at least our total surplus of 15.9 million.
Okay, and
Mhm.
I have a question,
Yes, sir.
Director Taylor. So just doing simple math. So if it was not for the CARES Act direct reimbursements, the fund balance change would have been approximately, I guess, about
6.7. You're right. Well,
9 million.
yeah, I'll show that in a minute.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Next slide. Okay. Let me just see here. I'm sorry, I meant to put that as a note, but the dollar amount, if you were to take the $15 million, if you go back for a second, please. If you take the 14.5 million, right, and you subtract the 8.8, that gives you roughly about $5.7 million that you would normally, if the CARES Act was not there, we would have had a total surplus of approximately 5.7 or $6.7 million. Okay. General fund balance sheet. Sorry.
I want to say thank you very much for that clarification.
Okay, very good. Our general fund balance sheet. Now, when you're looking at the balance sheet, it's different than the income statement. The balance sheet rolls up all of our assets, which include our current assets, which are cash and our accounts receivable, as well as our long-term assets, and that is capital improvements and the value of those capital improvements. Our liabilities are subtracted from that. Our liabilities could be, with our current liabilities, that would be accounts payable, or our long-term liabilities, which are long-term debt payments and the like. There are deferred inflows and outflows, and what this is this is an exchange of funds between fund accounts. So it could be an exchange of funds between water and sewer back to the general fund, or vice versa. Now, what we do in that case, we are not subsidizing the water sewer fund at all, and nor is the water sewer fund subsidizing the general fund. What this is that all the cash is collected in the general fund. We pay out bills out of the general fund, and then other funds reimburse us for those payments. So, with that said, we end up having a fund balance this year of $62.5 million. That's down below. It actually increased in 2021 over our fund balance from 2020 of 47.9. This increase is 14.5 or $14.6 million. Okay. Of that fund balance of $62.5 million, there's a portion of it that is non-spendable, and that is, it is an allocation to our motor vehicle fund, as well as some debt-related non-spendables. But then you have your budget reserve account. We have fully funded our budget reserve account at $17.2 million, leaving a tax stabilization reserve of $40.8 million. So what we're seeing is that we have a fairly good reserve position. We've fully funded our budget reserve account. When we go out to the bond markets, your reserve accounts really telegraph and message to the bond markets about your solvency as an entity. Generally speaking, anything over 25% of your revenue. If you've got a fund balance that's over 25% of your expected revenue for a given year, that's considered very, very healthy. And I am pleased to say that we have a very healthy fund reserve. I'm going to go on to the water sewer fund. Does anybody have any questions about the general fund? I'm sorry, Chairman, Mr. Chair, I meant to ask you, do you have any questions about that?
I have no specific questions if there aren't questions from my colleagues. Okay.
Okay.
Can we move on to the water
Sure.
sewer?
Now, the water sewer fund operates in much the same way, but they don't call it a fund balance, they call it a net position. However, let me just walk this through. Our revenues for the water sewer fund were $83.4 million. Our expenditures were at $71,822,122. That meant that we had an operating gain of $11,637,846. Now, there's a number of non-operating revenues that come into play when you're looking at these particular reserves. And in this case, let me just get my notes. Yeah. These are primarily interest expenses. And what when we're paying our bonds, we have to, it's called a below the line entry. You have your operating gain or loss, but then you have to deduct that interest expense that has been allocated for your bond issues. And that interest expense was $5.8 million. We also had some capital grants and contributions as part of the as part of our contributions coming in. I believe in this case it may have been from the state bond funds. I can get clarification on that. However, the change in net position overall after the operating gain and deducting the interest and adding some small grants and contributions, we had a net change in our net position of $6.7 million, $6,796,695. Okay. Next page. Okay. Well, as I had mentioned before, we have our assets. Our total asset base is $438,066,784. Our liabilities are $254,426,143. This gives us a net position of $183,640,641. Now, that is not all available to us. What happens is that we deduct off the balance sheet something called a net investment for capital assets. That $183 million, of that amount of money, 156,000 of it is tied up in capital assets. They are not liquid. They are in everything from bricks and mortar to sewer piping, water piping, infrastructure in the water sewer plant, in the wastewater treatment plant. This is all capital assets. Okay. In FY21, we had a net position minus the net assets, these net capital assets, of $27.2 million. Okay. This is down from FY20. by approximately $8.1 million. Now, why is it down? There are two reasons. The first reason is that we reduced our accounts receivable from 31.2 million to 29.5 million. We reduced it because people had paid back their accounts receivable. We also wrote off some penalties and interest on a number of accounts. The difference there was about $1.7 million. The remainder of that 8.1 million actually went into capital projects. Those projects then get accounted for in your capital assets and therefore are not liquid. All told, we have a net position in this reserve, in the water sewer balance sheet, of $27.2 million. Now, that particular amount is broken up into two areas, which my apologies, I failed to put them on here, but you'll see those when we go through the audit statements. That $27.2 million is broken up into two main components. One is an operating and maintenance reserve. That operating and maintenance reserve fully funds the operating and maintenance reserve at 17% per the rate stabilization ordinance that was passed 2 years ago. So we have fully funded under the reserve account, the operations and maintenance reserve. And what that operations and maintenance reserve does is it protects us in case there's a catastrophic impact to the water or sewer treatment plants and they go offline. That means if water is not being able to be delivered, it cannot be billed, and therefore we see this incredible drop in revenue. We can tap into that reserve with City Council's approval, with their authorization, to pay debt service and approximately 3 months of the operating plant, where 3 months of operations in the water sewer fund. That would either include the water treatment plant or the sewer treatment plant. The second component to the reserves of that 27.2 million is for the rate stabilization reserve. Now, this rate stabilization reserve was established in order for us to do two things. One is to begin putting away funds to utilize in cases of issues pertaining to whether rates should be increased or not. And then two, to message to the rating agencies that there are sufficient reserves to ensure that we are operating the plant and that we have some solvency there in terms of making some of our policy decisions. And the good news is that we do. We have 13.5 million reserved in the O&M reserve and $13.6 million in the rate stabilization reserve. So, in conclusion, I tried to make this as less complicated as I could, but in conclusion, I would say that we are in fairly good territory with respect to the general fund and fairly good territory with regard to the water sewer fund. Now, I caution this. On the general fund side, we are seeing some softness in the wage tax area. Of course, our parking area is also an area in which we've seen decreases. And, given what may occur economically, we would have to discuss those areas that may be economically sensitive on the general fund side. On the water sewer side, what we're faced with is we have a situation where we need a significant amount of improvements to the water sewer treatment area, just the infrastructure alone. And we need to make sure that we have sufficient reserves in order for us to pivot to be able to make those infrastructure decisions. And that may include bringing on some more debt through the bond issuance. I'm going to stop there because this is really going into kind of an area where WEFAC, OMB, and the mayor's budget is coming up and will be addressed. But I think that going into the FY23 budget, there are some cautionary tales that we have to take back. But overall, the financial situation with the city is stable and relatively steady.
Okay. I have a question, Director Taylor, in regards to the water sewer fund. So I noticed there was a drop, obviously, approximately $8 million from fiscal year 20 to fiscal year 21. And was that with the rate increase, so that's factoring in the recent rate increase that we imposed? Is that factoring in that those dollars, or were those dollars not realized yet?
Those dollars were realized. That was in FY20.
Okay, so those dollars were realized. Okay. And a follow-up question, Director Taylor, is in regards to the impact on the water sewer fund of the abatement in water sewer, I don't know what you call it, water sewer pursuit of certain accounts. Was that factored into the dip in the revenues from fiscal year 20 to fiscal year 21?
It was. What we saw was there were two things operating here. Our accounts receivable, as you know, for the last 3 years, we've been really kind of looking at our collections as well as our accounts receivable. And there are a number of accounts that simply needed to be corrected, and we did that. So in some cases, we wrote down some of the penalties and interest in order to make that occur. However, there was also a number of, for the average user, people who come in for our payment agreements, we do give some relief in terms of our penalties and interest. For instance, in some cases, if you come in to pay off your entire water bill, we may forego penalties and interest to make it more affordable. It all depends on a number of standards such as income and the like. So there were a number of things that are operating there. So in short answer to your question is yes, there is some relief. Now, I will say that the good news is that a number of under our utility assistance program, in which we were using CARES Act money, we're now using a piece of the ARPA money. And there are two new programs called the Low Income Water Assistance Program and the Delaware Housing Assistance Program. Renters and owners can get water assistance relief. And that money actually comes back to us from the state to pay back the accounts that the individuals on which they're behind. So the good news is that those programs, CARES, ARPA, LEWAP, and DHAP, all contain a provision whereby that money comes back to us, satisfies the individual's debt, but also increases our revenues.
Okay, thank you very much, Director Taylor. I believe there's a question from Councilmember Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think my understanding is that we lost some revenue based on the lawsuit with the county, monthly payment that some attorneys determined that we weren't going to get. And so I'd like that discussed. And then also, where is the lawsuit? Where are we in that? How is it going to affect those water sewer rates? And is that the reason, was the decrease in that monthly payment from the county one reason that we were so under? And basically, how is it going to affect us going forward?
My apologies, Councilmember Gray, but I am not involved in the lawsuit settlement issue. That is being handled through the law department and through Kelly Williams. So she can give you a better idea where they are with regard to the status. But yes, in 21, we were still somewhat under our, the county was still underpaying a portion of that, of the sewer charges. So that did have some effect on the revenues.
Okay, thank you. I'll check with Commissioner Williams for that
Yep.
information. Thank
Please,
you.
thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I'm going to turn it to members of the public if there's any questions or comments. All right, seeing none, I want to turn it back to members of the council. If there's any other questions or comments about the comprehensive annual financial report, as we're going to call it that now, or they're going to call it by a former name, I think. All right. All right. With that, thank you very much, Director Taylor.
Welcome. Thank you.
Overview. And now moving to item number 3 on the agenda. This is a overview of the audit of the city's financial statements for fiscal year 2021 comprehensive annual financial report by the outside auditor, Belfort Lyons Schuman. Is there anyone from, I believe is Mr. Fernarius? You're on mute, sir. You're on.
I got it.
Okay, got it. Okay.
Thank you,
All right,
Mr.
Mr.
Chairman.
Fernarius, the floor is yours, sir.
Okay, I'm George Fernarius. I'm here with Michael Mast, and we're your auditors from Belfort Lyons and Schuman. So Ms. Bassnight has our slides for our presentation, and I'll go over the not so much the numbers, but the conduct of the audit and the results of the audit with you tonight. Of course, we'll try and answer all your questions if you have any. So next slide, please. Okay. Our audit, we're engaged to do your audit for the year ended June 30th, 2021. And the audit was performed under 2 sets of auditing standards. The first is generally accepted auditing standards, which apply to all governments and businesses, nonprofits. And then there are also government auditing standards which are specific to governments, such as the city, and they entail some extra requirements on the auditors, such as the requirement to get specialized training in government accounting and auditing every 2 years, and the standards concerning our reporting. So those are the 2 standards that we work under. Okay, next slide. So the results for your financial audit for the year, fiscal year 21, was an unqualified opinion or unmodified opinion. That's not, that's old language, but it's a clean opinion. You have a standard opinion on your financial statements. So that's a good thing. On the second report that we issued, the report under the government auditing standards, it's also a clean opinion. However, we do have some findings and recommendations, which I'll talk about a bit later. There's a third report that is not yet complete, and that is the report on compliance and internal control over your federal programs, the single audit. We're close to finishing that, but we probably need 2 or 3 more weeks to get that finished. So we'll be issuing that later. The deadline for that report is not until September. However, we want to get it to you much sooner than that. Okay, next. So I think, Marshall, I think you skipped the slide. Or there's a slide missing there, page 3. Okay, I'll just talk
Yeah,
okay.
that
So
would be fine. Thank you.
okay, we're required to make certain representations to you as the council, along with the administration, those charged with governance of the city. So we're required to go over these things and make sure that everybody understands that in conducting an audit and presenting financial statements, there are certain things that, certain estimates that are used in the financial statements. Some of the more important estimates are things such as the actuarial determinations for the pension liabilities, for example. There are certain significant disclosures that are in the notes to the financial statements. If any of you have your copy of the financial statements, the notes are presented after the basic financial statements around page 36 of the statements. And as Director Taylor mentioned earlier, there's a lot of good information about the city, background and support for all the numbers. So those significant disclosures are in the notes to the statements. We didn't have any significant difficulties that we encountered in dealing with management in performing the audit. If we had, we would be required to report that to you. There were some delays, but we got good cooperation from city management. We have provided to management and in a letter all material correcting adjusting journal entries. So any changes that we made, that we proposed to the financial statements, we provided a listing of those to city management. We also provided a listing of uncorrected misstatements. Those are adjustments that we didn't feel were material. They came up in our work, but they're not material. So we did not propose any adjustments. And those uncorrected misstatements are not material, both individually and in the aggregate. So we had no disagreements with management. Again, if we had any disagreements on accounting matters or other important issues, we'd be required to report them to you, but we had none. We received all the representations from management that we requested during and at the completion of the audit. And to our knowledge, management did not consult with any other auditors during or after the audit. Sometimes management might have some questions about something that the auditors are proposing, and they may seek to get a second opinion from another firm, but there were no such consultations. So we're also required to report to you that management is responsible for the preparation and presentation of the financial statements. in accordance with accounting principles generally accepted in the United States. So it's management's responsibility, and they did put together the financial statement package. It's our responsibility to express opinions on the financial statements, that they are fairly presented and free of any material errors. So again, the audit opinion was unmodified, a clean opinion. Okay, so we'll move to the next slide, and we'll talk about the second report that we issued. This is the next slide, which is audit under government auditing standards. Next one. There we go. So the this is the audit report that's required under government auditing standards, and it is the formal title is there. It's a report on internal control over financial reporting and on compliance with other matters based on an audit of the financial statements under government auditing standards. So we're looking at two things in this part of the audit. We're looking at the internal controls over your financial reporting, and we're looking at compliance with laws and regulations. So these government auditing standards are issued by the U.S. Comptroller General, and the results of this part of the audit were that we had 7 findings in the report. One is what we consider a material weakness, which is a finding which, if it's not corrected, would have a material effect on your financial statements. It's a large weakness, a material weakness. The others, there are 5 what we call significant deficiencies in internal control, and 1 significant deficiency in a compliance matter. A significant deficiency is a deficiency in your internal controls that is not as serious as a material weakness, but it's significant enough so that we have to report it to you. So I'll go over these. I have listed them on the next page. We can go into a little bit of detail. The detailed report has been provided to management and council already. So all of the details of these findings, plus management's responses and their corrective action plans, are in the full report. So the first finding, number 1, is the material weakness in the financial reporting close process. So there were 10 material adjustments, and some of these are combinations of several adjustments, but for reporting purposes, there were 10 adjustments that we had to make during the audit, or we had to propose during the audit to correct the financial statements. So these were significant, and it is an issue with the closing process that management needs to address. And when I say management, I don't mean just the finance department, although all the entries and the statements come through finance. There are other things that are reported here in these adjusting entries that come from other departments, and the other departments have to do their share too in the closing process and work with finance. For example, there were some adjusting entries that had to be made in grants, and also some that came from the HR department So just because they're not really accountants or financial doesn't mean that there aren't financial areas that each department is responsible for. So that's the largest, that's the material weakness. And we recommended that finance enhance the end of year closing process, involve the other departments more, and review all of the adjustments that we proposed this year to try to make sure that something similar didn't happen next year. Our second finding is.
I have a question.
Yes,
Mr. Fernandez.
Mr. Chairman.
For material weaknesses, would have are any of these pre-existing weaknesses that just have not been corrected, or are they brand new?
Yeah, in general, the financial statement closing process was reported upon last year also. However,
That's what I recall. Yeah, because
yeah.
I thought it seemed like a subject matter I've seen before.
And actually the year before that. But I will say that the adjustments that led to this finding are different. They're not the same. We're not correcting the same errors this year as last year.
Okay. All right. All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Fernandez. And I believe Councilmember Gray has a question.
Yes, sorry to intercede right here, but I have to go. I would like a copy of the compliance and internal control report before budget. I think budget is March 30th. I'd really like to have a copy of that report prior to budget season. Thank you.
Okay. So noted, Councilmember Gray, and we will have Ms. Bass tonight, and staff will make sure we get that circulated to everyone.
Okay. Our second finding is a repeat finding involving the Department of Integrated Technologies, General Controls. We have noted findings in this area before, but I will say that the director and management in general have whittled down the findings in this area so that there are only a couple of points that are still active. So they've actually done a good job in addressing some of the points that we had made a few years back in earlier audits, and they're pretty close to addressing everything. Now, this is, as you know, we all know, it's a very important area, and the recommendations that we have are have to do with security policy and security policy for the most part. And the director is aware of it, and he's working on these issues, and he was working on them before we pointed it out. It's an ongoing process. The third finding is also a repeat finding. In your payroll system, they have password. There are people who are called super users in the Munis system, and they have powerful passwords that can be used to make changes in the system and not leave an audit trail. So we've pointed this out the last couple of years. It seems to be a feature or a quirk of your Munis payroll system. It's still from our point of view, it's still an area that we need to report on. Even and we've recommended that the payroll division since they know that this is a weakness in the system, they need to take some extra measures to run reports and pay attention to the people who have this super user access. Since the system can't operate without these super users, they at least have to take a look at it and make sure that there's no adjustments being made that aren't approved. Number 4 is police vacation and comp time tracking. We need the HR department and the police department need to work together. They operate 2 different systems for tracking comp time. And the one in HR is the official system because that information goes into your financial statements. However, it's not kept up to date. So every year we've had to propose adjustments to the comp time liability. So we're recommending that police and HR get together to resolve this issue and bring it up to date. Number 5 is also in HR. It had to do with medical claims that are under your stop loss insurance policy. So there were, Michael, you might be able to help me out with this. I think there were over $1 million in reimbursements that the city was should have received, and the follow-up hadn't been done at the time we did our audit. Is that, Mike, is that pretty accurate?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So we brought this to the attention of the HR department. They're taking action to get the reimbursements to the city, and but that was $1 million that could have been left on the table. So the 6th finding has to do with timesheet approvals. Because of the time sensitive nature of your payroll, people need to get paid. So the system allows payroll checks to be issued without all of the proper approvals. So we're recommending that when this happens, and sometimes it's unavoidable, that HR circle back and do some after the fact review of these approvals or non-approvals. And the last finding, which was directed to finance, and Director Taylor spoke to it a bit during his presentation, the operating and maintenance reserve and rate stabilization reserves in the water fund were not they were not able to be fully funded this year. The rate stabilization reserve was fully funded at 17%, but the O&M reserve is, although it's got a healthy balance of 13.5 million, it was reduced from last year due to the overall that was the amount that was available in the net position of the fund. So it's a reduction from the amount that was in that fund last year. So technically you have you're out of compliance with the ordinance that set up these reserves. So we're reporting that to you. It's something that I think the council and administration have to look at the original legislation and perhaps consider some changes to it, because when you have a down year, although you had a profit last year in the water and sewer fund, the reserves are less than what they were the prior year, and that affects these 2 reserves in your fund balance. So I think we're recommending that you take a look at that, and you may have a desire to make some modifications to that going forward.
Mr.
So-
Chair, may I ask a question on that, please?
Yes, indeed, Ms. Bass-Knight.
Yes.
Yes.
So just a question. So if that is out of compliance with the ordinance, is there a timing that we should be in compliance? And the reason I'm asking is because, you know, we're about to build the fiscal year 2023 budget. And as we're looking at the rates, we are going to be looking at that rate stabilization fund.
Yeah, the problem with that is that if you look at the financial statements, you'll see in this, in the net position of the water and sewer fund, that all of the reserves that were available to be restricted in the rate stabilization and O&M reserves were used up. So there's nothing that could have been done about it. So it was, like I said, technically it's out of compliance, but there are no other reserves that could have been put into the O&M reserve to bring it up to where the code says it should be. So that it's, there's really, the result that you have there was unavoidable. So the only thing that could have been done, I think, to avoid it is maybe towards the end of the year, and this is part of our recommendation, towards the end of the year, before the books are closed and before June 30th, council and the administration should take a preliminary look at these reserves and see if they're if legislation might be required to avoid the non-compliance.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Fernandez. I believe Council President Congo has a question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation. If you can go back to the $1 million that is owed to the city, because
Yes.
I think it's need to be reimbursed from outside parties.
Yes.
Can you explain that in detail? Can you maybe provide us a solution, a possible
Okay.
solution if you have one?
The solution is in the works. So you may have already received the $1 million. I'm not sure about that. But what happens, the city buys, the city is insured, self-insured for health insurance claims up to a certain point. And if something, and over that point, you have commercial stop loss insurance. So there is an evaluation done, and you're working with your insurance company and an outside consultant to analyze the claims that are out there. So there was a period of time when the outstanding claims had not been analyzed for some time, and this amount, this $1 million, was due to the city, but it had not been recognized as a receivable at that point. It wasn't recorded in your books, and after HR and we and finance did some follow-up on that, the matter got squared away, and now HR is in contact with the consultants, and I believe the money is, if it's not received yet, it's on its way. Michael, did I describe that correctly?
Yes, that's correct.
Yes, I think I'm talking about something else. Maybe I'm sorry if I didn't explain it clearly, but I believe when the police officers do extra duties, they're paid from the city first, and then
Okay.
that's the money I'm talking about.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. That was a finding in last year's audit. And we, of course, followed up on it this year. We reviewed that area and we had no finding in it this year. The finance department has addressed that finding. And you'll see in our report under the report that's issued under the government auditing standards, there's a section towards the back of the report where we do the current status of prior year findings. And in that, there's a brief description of the finding from last year's audit. And then there's a statement in there that the finding has been addressed. So, you know, we did do the follow-up. Finance has addressed what we reported last year. So for FY21, it was no longer a finding.
Okay, all right, thank you. And that practice that's not happening anymore? So
The practice, I mean, the extra duty billings are still being done. However, the billings from the city to the organizations that use the police services and sometimes firefighters are caught up. So,
okay, I got you. Okay, thank you. Appreciate that.
All right, Mr. Fernandez, you can continue.
okay, I was at the end of the presentation. That was so I'll be glad through you, Mr. Chairman, to entertain any other questions.
Okay, Mr. Fernandez, don't see, Miss Bass-Knight.
Yes, Mr. Fernandez, just one question for you, because I know that you mentioned that you're not, that the single audit is not available because that's not due as of yet. But can you just share with the council that you did receive the finding from HUD regarding the Home Partnership Investment Fund regarding the $446,000, I think $464,000 finding? If you can just share with the council that that report was shared with you as the outside auditor.
Yes, we early on in the audit, we had discussions with the department heads who receive federal funds. And one of the things that we inquire about is whether there were any other auditors from the state or the federal government that had issued reports. And Director Weir in the Department of Real Estate and Housing mentioned to us the HUD monitoring visit and report and findings. And he gave us a copy of the report, which is in our files now. So yes, we were aware of that, and it will be considered during our work. I don't know exactly if since HUD already reported on the finding, and since it involves a year, it doesn't involve fiscal year 21. I don't know that we need to report it again in our reports, but we are aware of it.
Thank you.
Okay, all right. Vice Chair Harley.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Sir, I understand what you just said in terms of not reporting it as another finding, but do you at least review it to see what corrective action has been applied to see if it's being resolved?
Yes, we have read the whole report, and it's my understanding that that HUD requested repayment of the funds from the city, and that the Director of Real Estate and Housing proposed to HUD that rather than the city cutting a check to reimburse HUD, that he proposed that HUD allow the city to accept less in from the Home program over the next 3 years so that the city could reimburse HUD in that way. I don't know currently what the status of it is, but before we finish our single audit, we will be following up on that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Are there any other questions by members of council? Okay, I'll now kick the members of the public for any questions or comments. All right, seeing none, I'll turn it back to members of council for any final questions or comments from Mr. Veneris about the audit. Okay, seeing
Yes,
none.
I'm sorry,
sorry.
Mr.
Sure.
Chair, my phone is acting up a little bit here. I'm sorry.
Okay, the floor is yours, ma'am.
Okay, one last question. I guess this is for the auditor. Now, what the Director Weir is proposing, is that not something that City Council has to vote on? Or is that something that is within their realm of authority to just adjust without it being voted on in legislation? For HUD.
Are you directing that question to me or to the city auditor?
Either one, whoever can answer it.
Because I don't know the answer to that question. I'm sorry. It's probably something that the city solicitor maybe or the city auditor would know more about.
I think that's something that we probably need to run it by the city solicitor just to verify.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. If there's no other questions or comments by members of council, again, Mr. Veneris, I appreciate your time and for the great amount of detail that you provided to council. This is definitely a lot of great information provided. I think this informative discussion will obviously allow us to move forward as a city. So I appreciate your presentation. All right.
Thank you very much. Thank you to all the members as well.
All right, thank you very much. And with that, we'll move to item number 4 on the agenda. It's the overview of the fiscal year 2021 single audit reports and management letter by the outside auditor Belfint, Lyons, and Schoen. So I'm not sure if you're taking this, Mr. Veneris, or is this city auditor Williams? Whoever wants to go first.
Okay, I think we covered the single audit that we're working on. It's in process, and we hope to have it completed in the next few weeks.
Okay. All right, excellent. So all right, and is there anything on your side, Auditor Williams, City Auditor Williams, for you to add that we haven't covered already?
Council Chair, no, there is not. That was something I had communicated as well, that, the external auditors didn't have the single audit completed at this time. I didn't think it would be ready by the time this meeting came around, but as George mentioned, in a couple of weeks, it should be finished.
All right, thank you very much. All right, and with that, I appreciate your time, City Auditor Williams. And let me just double check. I believe that completes our agenda. So we made it a pretty chock full agenda in just under 2 hours. So I appreciate everyone being engaged. And this kicks off a very busy season for the Finance Committee, as we will be going into the city budget season. So for housekeeping, the mayor's budget address is slated for next Thursday, March 17th. That will be when the budget season officially kicks off. So please tune in. I believe the time is 6 p.m., Marshall, or is it 6:30? Okay.
Right. Actually, the time for the budget hearing started at 4:30.
Oh, 4:30. No.
Yeah.
The budget. No, the mayor's address.
Oh, the mayor's budget address is at 6:00 p.m.
Okay, 6:00. Okay, I just want to confirm that. All right, thank you very much, Ms. Bass Knight. So 6:00 next Thursday. So please tune in, as this will be, as always, a very important moment for the state of the city. And then after that, we will kick off budget hearings later in the month. Our first budget hearing will be on March 30th at 4:30 p.m. All right, and then we have a series of budget hearings throughout the month of April, and then the beginning of May, and then we look to, of course, finalize the budget as we finish out the month of May. So please pay attention. We'll have that as well as the regular Finance Committee meetings. So again, please stay engaged, and if there's any questions, please contact me, the chair of the committee, or Vice Chair Harley. Or if there's other questions, you can also contact City Council staff, including our senior financial director, Ms. Marshall Bass Knight. And with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
All right, is there a second? All right, well, I will second.
Second.
And okay, thank you. And all those in favor? All right. Any opposed? All right. Well, the meeting is adjourned, and thank you very much. And we look forward to seeing you at the budget hearing. Take care.
Thank
Be safe,
you.
everyone.
Good night.
Take care. Good night.